Hey everyone, today we're going to make a quick video on submitting a form in HTML CSS and then saving that to a database using Heroku and ClearDB MySQL. So to get started, let's create a new folder. You can put it anywhere you want. I'll put it on the desktop and I'll name it, just say user data. And then we can open VS Code and then open that folder in VS Code. So click open folder, go to your desktop, click on the folder you just created, and then open. Alright, so now let's create a new folder in here. We can call it code, and that's where we'll put all of our code. Open the terminal in VS Code. You can use control backtick. Backtick is the character next to 1 on most characters on the left. And now open the integrated terminal here. And then let's use the cd or change directory command and then go into the code folder. Okay, so now you make sure you have a Node installed on your computer. If you don't, you can go to the Node.js website and click download and then install it. And that'll just let you run, use npm, the Node package manager, and also run Node locally. So we're going to do npm init -y to generate a package JSON file in our code folder. We can call this user data. You don't have to change any of this, but for now, just make it a little cleaner. In the scripts tag, this is basically when you have the npm command, you could do like things like npm start, which will run the start command in here if you have one defined. You could do npm run test to run the test command here. And whatever you have defined here in this string will run as a command when you do npm run test. So we can get rid of test for now, just keep start. In start, we'll have run node index.js. So node index.js will use the node service and it will run the JavaScript in the index.js file. So let's actually create that file. Now index.js. So now we have a blank JavaScript file here. And we're going to need some packages. So in the terminal down here, let's do npm I for install. You can also type it on install. And let's say express will install Morgan, body hyphen parser, pro hair thesis for the database. And let's do .env. So you could chain a bunch of packages you want together and install all of them for you. So express is for the REST API to serve files to the front end and then also handle any other requests for like data. And we could respond with JSON or whatever we want. Morgan will log any requests made to the backend in the console here and also on your server to make it easier to debug. Body parser will parse any forms posted or the body of any request to the backend, so you could interpret it as like a JSON object. Proheresis is a wrapper on the MySQL package. It makes it a little easier to use. .env lets you define system level environmental variables in like a single file, and just it's easier for working with locally. So we'll see all these in a little bit. So you can run this command. It'll take a little while. There you go. So everything installed. So now we can go to the index.js file here. And let's do our imports. So express equals require express. And could duplicate this line. Let's just say Morgan. And then we'll need proheresis. And this package is actually not in the main folder, so we'll just require it like that. And then we're going to want the body parser. And once you make a couple REST APIs, it'll all be pretty much the same. So you'll, for any API you normally create with Node, usually Express, Morgan, body parser, proheresis, and .env. So it's pretty standard. So once you learn these commands, it's not like you have to learn different things every time. It's usually the same kind of stuff. Okay, so now let's create a new app. So say const app equals express. So it's creating a new instance of express, a new app. And then let's create a variable called port and say process.env.port or 8080. So we'll check the process environmental environment, and so like your local environmental variables on your computer. See if port is installed. If it is, it'll use that. Otherwise, it'll go to 8080 as a default. So now we say app.use, and say express.static public. So what this does is it will serve any static file that's in the public folder. So in the code folder, we can create a new folder called public, create a new file in the public folder called index.html, and then we just put an h1 tag, say hello, and save it. And then we can go back here to our index.js file, and let's keep going. So say .use Morgan dev. So that's just going to log everything in development mode. .use, and this is where I don't even remember these commands, so I usually go to the body parser documentation, and you can copy these. I'll put them in the video description. So .use Perl encoded, and then body parser.json. And then proheresis is something else we're going to need, so we can do that in a little bit. So then after that, we can say .listen, and you can pass in the port, and then you can also pass in an anonymous function, and you just say console.log backticks server listening on port. Okay, so that's a basic REST API right there, just to serve static files currently. So let's try running this. So if you run npm start, you'll see it's going to run the command that we have in the package, we define in the package JSON, node index.js. So you see it says server listening on port 8080. So if you hit Control C and you do node index.js, you'll see it does the same exact thing. So npm start is what the server we're going to use, Heroku, uses to start your server. So that's why we define the start command here. And that's also why we have the process env.port here instead of only using 8080, because Heroku is going to use the environmental port and pass us one to use. So start it up again. Do that a little slower. Start it up again. You'll see server listening on port 8080. Go over to your browser, and then go to localhost 8080, and you'll see the hello. And that's coming from this line here, where we have the express static public. And let's actually move this down here, so we have Morgan first. So we'll see the log. So you could do Control C to stop the server, and rerun npm start, refresh. Now you'll see the get command here, or the get request. Okay, so now we have a basic server. So in the index.html file, we can change this to user data, and then let's create a new form tag with an input with a name. Just say first placeholder, first name. We can duplicate this. Let's say last. And then let's say, let's do maybe an age. So name, age, type we could set to number, so it'll help to validate the data for us. These are inferred as text, but you could say type text. And then let's add a placeholder here. Alright, so we have that, and now let's add a button to actually submit our form. And then on here, just to be explicit, we could say type submit. All right, so if we refresh over here, you should see it changes to have the user data, first name, last name, age, and submit button. So on actually all of these, let's do a required. This will make sure we enter all these before we submit the form. So if we go over here, refresh, try to submit, you'll see it'll say please fill out this field. On that age, we want to also validate that people don't enter invalid ages. So let's do a min of 0, and then a max of, let's just say 130. So if we enter text here, then we say -1, it'll say value must be greater than or equal to 0. And if we enter a value of 140, value must be less than or equal to 130. So it won't let us submit it until we fix that. So that's some simple validation. And let's open, you can right click in your browser, click inspect. This will open the developer tools and click on the network tab here. And if you enter data, so let's say my name is here, age, I'll put my age 26. If you submit it, you'll see it submits in up here. You see it in the query string. So it does first equals Jake, last equals here, age equals 26. And these keys, the first, last, age, come from the name here. So where we put these names. In this case, we don't want to have that in here because what if you have a password? We don't want to show up in the URL address bar up here. So let's go ahead and change this. So in the form, say method equals post, and that will make it not show up in the URL bar. So let's get rid of that, and then fill this out again, and submit it. And cannot post to /, which is true because we didn't handle that. Serving static files will only normally serve it if you're making a GET request. So let's go back to our index.js file, and we could add a .post. So .post to /, and then we add a handler function, anonymous function here. And while we're doing this, let's actually make this a little cleaner, and we could post it to /API / user data, or you just say user. So when you make a post request to /API / user, it'll run this handler function here. So for now, let's just say response. Let's add 2 parameters here, request and response. And then we'll say response.json request.body. So we're just going to print out whatever the request body is, which in this case should be our form data. So let's go back to our package or our index.html file, and then down here in the console, let's restart our server. So Control-C, npm start, and then on this form, let's add an action attribute, and it will say /API / user. So it'll match the route we added here. And then let's go ahead and refresh the page over here. We have to click in here and hit enter. And then submit your data again. And we get it printed out, which is handled here by our post route. So now we want to save this to a database. So this is where the Heroku part comes in. So we can go ahead and create an app. I'll say user data test. It's not available, so I'll do 23. And you could name whatever you want. And then create app. Go over to resources. And in add-ons, search for clear DB MySQL. Save it. You could just do the free version. And now you have the free MySQL database added to your app. So now go over to settings, reveal config vars, and then copy this value here. And for now, we're just going to hardcode this, but later on in the video, we'll clean it up So we'll say MySQL string equals, and then paste that string that you copied. And then let's say const database equals new proheresis, and this requires the MySQL string as a parameter. So pass that in. And now down here, we can make calls to the database with the MySQL string. But before we do that, let's actually use this database manager. I downloaded SQL Pro. I'll put a link in the description. So I'll open that. And I'll create a new database. And I'll call it user data. And then we're going to copy the values from here. So the first one is the username, so copy that. Username after the colon is the password before the @sign. And then after the @ up to .com, including .com, copy that, that's the host. And then after the slash, after .com, before the question mark, is a database name. So let's paste that there. And then you can save this as a favorite, and then let's connect to it. So now we're connected to our database, and we can create tables to store our data. So click this plus button in the bottom left, and we can call it user, and click add. And it's automatically defaulted with an ID column. So let's add a new column. We can call it first underscore name. You can make the type of varchar. You want to give it a length of 50. Create a new column last name varchar 50. And then click on the ID, click backspace, and delete. And then allow null. You can uncheck both of these so that they're required. And then we'll add one more for age. Keep it as an integer, and we'll make that required as well. We could add another field, date added, make it a date time, and we could store whenever this record was added to the table. And if you want, you could either have an ID and keep the ID column, so you have a unique ID for each user, or you can make the first name, last name the primary key, so those have to be unique. So let's actually keep the ID, so if you still have it, you could just keep it. And we'll put that back to the top. And then we could say extra auto increment, and then add. So this will be a primary key, and it'll auto increment whenever you add a new record. So now we have this table. So in the post user, let's say database.execute, use backticks, break it to a new line, and then say insert into the table user, parentheses, and we'll list all the columns we want to add. We want to add a first name, last name, comma, age, comma, date, added. And after this parenthesis, say values, open parenthesis, close parenthesis. Open parenthesis, close parenthesis here. And then we're going to copy all these values up here. Say at first name, at last name, at age, comma, now. So the at before the names is saying it's going to be a prepared statement, which means we're not actually passing the values. So what we could do is we could actually say rec.body.first, and then this would put the first name right in here, and we want to wrap this in single quotes. But what if the user passes in bad data, or there's SQL injection where they actually break out of this and write their own code? To avoid that, we're going to use a prepared statement where we pass the values and the SQL separately to the database, so that it handles it and makes sure that the SQL injection can't occur. So you pass it in like this, and the now function is it's a MySQL function that just gets the current date and time, and it'll add that to the date added field. So after the last backtick, do a comma, and then curly braces, And for each of these, we're going to pass an actual value. So we'll have the first name, have the last name, and the age. So for the first name, we'll say rec.body.first, last name rec.body.last, and age will be rec.body.age. And these values here should match the name attribute on the form. So we have first, last, age. You can see that's what we posted on our server. First, last, age. So the rec.body year will contain this whole object. So we'll say rec.body whatever key you want, first, last, or age. And to clean this up, let's actually move this body up here. And then down here we just say body.first, last, age. And in front of the rec, let's say async. And then in front of database, let's say await. Because the execute function returns a promise. So we're going to wait for that to finish before moving on. And once it's done, down here, we could say added user. So response to that end added user. So let's restart our server, Control C, npm start. Go back to localhost 8080, and let's add our data again. Submit, and it'll say added user. So then go back to our database, click on content, and you'll see that record was added with ID 1 and the date added field. So that's just like a basic way to add forms and save the data to a database using Heroku. And once you're done with the project, you could upload it to Roku, and it'll be you'll be able to go to the user data test23.herokuapp.com or whatever you called your project. You just click open app here, and it'll show you your app once you publish it. So to make some improvements, let's get rid of this MySQL string hardcode here. Make a new file in code.env, and let's copy this back again. You can cut it actually, and then in .env, we're going to create a new value, clear db underscore database underscore URL equals, and paste that value. And then up here, let's say const.env equals require.env. So what this .env package does is it reads in all values from the .env file, and then it will put those in the process.env. So you can see over here in Heroku, it has this config variable, clear db underscore database underscore URL, and that's going to be on process.env.clear.db database URL when you go to the server. So we could do that locally, so this way it'll work locally and on the server. So for the MySQL string, process.env dot, and copy this key, clear db database URL, and with the .env, let's just say .env.config, and that will trigger it to load the values from the .env file. So we have all this. We can minimize this, make it a little cleaner, and then let's make a route .get /API/user. And we could do const users equals await database dot query backtick select all from user order space by date added descending. So we'll see the new ones first, and then we'll say response.json users. So now let's restart our server, go to localhost 8080/API/user, hit enter, and we'll get our data here. So if we have more than one user, you'll see a list of all of them here in this array with the square brackets. So if you don't feel like doing a local request to get this data and showing it, something else you could do is get rid of this response.json here and say response.content type, say HTML, and response.end colored backtick, and we could say users.map user, and we're going to go through each user, and .map returns whatever you return in this anonymous function. So we'll say return a paragraph tag. So we're going to create some HTML. We'll say user.first name, user.last name is user.age years old, and close the p tag. And then after the .map, let's say .join nothing. So let's reset our server again, go back over here and refresh, and you'll see it shows the data. So let's go back to the localhost 8080 and add another data point. Let's say John Snow, age 30, submit. Say it says added user. So let's go here, make a GET request, and we'll see both records now in the database. And you could format this however you want. You could keep it like this, or you can use the JSON like we had before. And if you have the JSON on the front end, you'll have to make a request with JavaScript to get the data, and then on the fly create a table or something with that data. And that's pretty much all we have to do for this to work. Let's try deploying it to Roku and make sure it works there as well. So if we go to the deploy tab, I'll give you some instructions on how to do that. You could set it up so it automatically deploys when you push it to GitHub, which is pretty nice. But in this case, let's do keep it simple. Go into, we're in the code folder already. Just do a git init, and we'd set this git remote. So copy this value, paste it, and then we can do a Heroku or git push Heroku master. So it's add sorry about that. Let's add all the files first. So git add all, git commit -m, our first commit, and we should not have done that actually. So don't do that. Let's get rid of node modules from that. Let's add to the code folder, add a .git ignore file, add node _ modules and the .env file. This way they're not included when we push our code. And if that does happen, what we could do is we can copy this out of the folder, the git folder, delete it, delete the node modules, and then do a git add all, git commit gem, fix Jake's mistake. So commit that. I was going to delete all the node modules from our commit, and I'll do a git push Roku master. So normally it won't be that complicated. I just messed it up a little bit. So what Roku is going to do is going to look at your package.json and see that it's there, and it's going to know it's a node project, and it's going to install the packages, and then it's going to run the npm start script, which will boot up our app. So it looks like it's done. So you can go to this website, it prints out here, or you can go to your Heroku dashboard and click open app, and you'll see your application running here. So I think that's pretty much it. So we can move this env file back here because it's not going to be in the git anymore. And then we could do npm install to reinstall our packages. So if you wanted to, you could clean this up a little bit, add like folders for routes, and then put these in the separate folder so this file is not as big. So if you're happy with what you have, you could stop watching this now, and don't forget to like and subscribe. But otherwise, you can continue watching just to clean it up a little bit more. So what I normally do is I create a config.js file, which will have a module that exports, and this will do the const.env, and then this will export any environmental variable you need for your application. So we'll have a port. So we'll say env.port or pd80, and then we'll have the database, which will be env.clear database euro, and then we can go back to our index.js file, get rid of the MySQL string, get rid of .env, and get rid of port. And we say const env equals require /config, and then the MySQL string will come from that. So env.database, and down here it will be env.port in both places. So we could run this, make sure it's still working properly. So go to the localhost version, refresh, and we still get the data. Okay, so one more thing I might do is in the routes folder we could add a index.js file, and let's also add a user.js file. And in the user, we're going to move the code from here, the get and post, to the user file. So we'll say const express equals require express, and import it. We'll create a new router. We'll say router, and then paste the code there. So .get.post. And we'll say module.exports equals router to export the router in this file, so we can import it in other files. So now we can go to the routes index file, and we'll do the same thing. So say const express equals require express, const router equals express.router, router.use, and we'll say slash user, and then we could use the router we created in the user file, so /user, and then we'll export this one too. So then we go back to the index.js file, we'll say .use, and then we'll import the index file from routes. We'll say when you go to /API, it will go to those routes. So it cleans it up a little bit, and then for the database, we're going to need this in the user route. So let's create another file and code called database.js, and then copy this line out, put it in the database file, and we're going to need to import the env. From the config file. And then we'll have the env database, and then we'll module.exports equals database. And what this will do is it'll let us share the database connection throughout the app, so we don't have to create a new one every time we use it in a route. So we could clean this up a little bit, get rid of those preferences. Actually, we should probably copy this out, put it in the database route. Save this. And let's go to our user.js file. and say const database equals database. We can restart our server, refresh, and it's not working. So let's see. Oh, so here we can get rid of both of these, because what it's doing is it's adding whatever you have here every level down. So we're starting at the top level, going to /API. We go to index, it goes to /user. We go to user, and then we don't need anything because it's just slash. So when you go here, this is handling /API/user already, so we don't have to do it twice. So we can restart our server again and refresh, and it should work now. So we cleaned it up a lot. So let's go do the Roku push again. So we could do git add all git commit -n, clean out files, git push Roku master. And now if you go over to your app on Roku and refresh, you'll see it's still working. You can go to your app /API/user and view the users. And you can also add a user. Let's say Harry Potter 25, submit, add a user, and then go to this route. And you'll see he's added to the database here. And we can go back to here to our database, click the little refresh button, and you'll see all the data is here as well. So that's pretty much it for a simple form to database and the reading from the database with an Express app. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for future videos. Thank you.